Hello and welcome to the Work Inspired podcast. I'm your host, George Lucas Pfeiffer, and today we're going to be exploring a fundamental human need. Now, we know we need clean air, food and water, shelter, safety, but what about literacy? Our guests today are the Florianis, Brian, who is the founder of Chicagoland not-for-profit Bernie's Book Bank, and his wife, Christy, who together have started Freedom Promotions, are here to explain to us why they believe reading is the single most important skill a child can have. They're going to give us perspective and ways that we can help. We're so excited that they're here. Work Inspired starts right now. Brian, Christy, thanks for being here. So excited you could be part of the show and join us early on, the first episode of season 4 of Work Inspired. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So let's start off with the question we ask every guest. Has it changed since the first episode? Tell us your professional stories. How'd you get to where you're at today?
Well, it's been a long and winding road. I can say that much. I got my master's degree in '99, and I've been working in social work for the most part for the last 20-some years, mostly with children and families and more on the front lines, working with families in their homes, with parents, and then also directly with children. So I've only recently come over to Freedom, which we'll talk about this year.
Cool. Did you always know that's what you wanted to do, is work with families?
I wanted to be of service always, and I wanted to find the place where I could have the most impact. The rest, details.
Yeah. Awesome. Brian, how about you?
Man, that's a great question. I don't know. We might need a few different kinds of books to have to unpack the chapters in there, but I would say that I've always just been seeking purpose in my life. And honestly, up until my dad, Bernie, who Bernie's Book Bank is named after, passed away, I thought I was going to be work in the golf business, and I was running golf schools for Golf Digest, and I really loved that. And honestly, that wasn't something I always thought that I was going to do. That kind of happened by happenstance as well, even though golf was always a big part of my life. But I really haven't been on a career path necessarily. My career path today, as it stands, found me, and it's more of a calling than it is a career or professional path. And frankly, I'm blessed to be able to call it that. I don't know if I could work in any other kind of environment than one that's full of passion and purpose. And
I've read the story about your father and his kind of entrepreneurial spirit and the literacy tie-in. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because from the golf course to literacy and the purpose-based mission of what you've done with both Bernie's Book Bank and Freedom Promotions, it's interesting. What's the connection there?
Well, I don't know if we call my dad an entrepreneur, but I think he represents millions of people that have come before him and millions that will come after him in terms of being an example of the American dream when opportunity is presented to you. He grew up in Western Pennsylvania, son of 2 immigrants, one from Poland, one from Italy, and had 7 other brothers and sisters in a 2-bedroom house that my dad didn't have running water till he went to college.
Wow.
Went on to get his doctorate and put 3 of us through school. And all I know is I'll never be a coal miner like my grandfather, his father was. And so he literally read his way to a better life. And, after he passed away and some deep reflection on what I wanted my life to represent, when I looked at his life, and in fact, my grandmother died on the same day. So my mom lost her husband and her mom on the same day. And why that's important is after reflecting on that, what I realized is that in their eulogies, we weren't talking about their success at all. We were talking about their significance. And there's a big difference. Success being about your accomplishments, significance being about the accomplishments of other people. And so I was kind of taking stock in my life. And if I were to take my last breath today at the time, what would my eulogy look like? And if I were to die today, would anybody have anything to say about me? Would it be true? And would it matter? And no matter how I shaped it, I really didn't like the answers to those questions. And so through that and a pretty deep spiritual drive, we'll call it a jive, a spiritual jive. I want to be a servant. And didn't really know what that meant, and the original let's say that differently. That was originally going to articulate itself in the form of being an elementary school teacher in an under-resourced community. And that's where I spent my first couple of years, understanding the need from a different perspective as an adult. And it didn't really sit well with me. So that's where Bernie's Book Bank started. And Freedom was born out of that story. And I don't know if you want me to go into that now, or we can probably pause.
I would like to hear that piece of it, but let's go back to the elementary school teacher for a second, because what I read was that you were helping people, but you realized that you weren't going to be able to stop the influx of all the people that would need help, that would just keep coming because it wasn't solving a problem. And so was that kind of like, what was the moment that you said there's got to be a better way to solve this problem of literacy, which I think the quote was, reading is the single most important skill a child needs. So if it's that important, where was there like an epiphany that you had? Was there like something that inspired you to say, I'm going to start a way to get these kids books?
Well, I think it was a combination of a few things. One is the experience in the schools. Coming into school as an adult, it's a totally different perspective of when you were in school yourself, right? We didn't learn to read and go, oh my gosh, I learned to read today, that my whole life's going to be different. Yeah. It just is. Yeah. Right. And then when you come in to a school system as an adult, first of all, you learn a lot about, a lot of us have a lot of opinions about the educational system, which we probably shouldn't have unless we spend some time there, not just as a student, but you spend some time there, and especially in an under-resourced community, you realize that this school is much more than just a school. It's everything to this community. It provides meals, it provides shelter, it provides, it's the connective tissue for the whole community. But not only that, we're trying to teach these children how to read, write, science, math, art. Unfortunately, in these schools, all that fun stuff has been ripped out because they're so far behind in reading and math. And I realized there too just how critical literacy was. That the pursuit of happiness that we're guaranteed in this country, it's really predicated on two things: who you know and what you know. And if you grow up in poverty, you don't know who you might need to know to get where you want to go. Your only choice is what you know, and that's built on the back of being a reader. And these children were not reading ready, and most of the second, third, and fourth graders were not reading proficient by third grade. I hate to say it, but it was almost over before it started. And I, as an American and someone that believes in our country and somebody believes in the promise that we've provided to millions of people, that really isn't an equitable promise. I thought, well, if we wanted to solve something big, you solve the literacy issue and you solve a lot of other issues. And then specific to literacy, you can't solve it all. So what's the one piece that we could solve that's a solvable problem? And book ownership was that piece, because what I was seeing, we were sending children home, they were wanting to read, but we knew there weren't any books in the home. We knew that their parents weren't taking them to the library. It doesn't matter why, we just knew it wasn't happening. And even in the school where I was working, you could check books out from the library, but you couldn't take them home. If you think about that practically, who's really responsible for getting the book back to the school? It's your parents. And if the parents aren't doing it, how many times are you going to let $13 walk out the door?
Right.
So the solution in America in 2020, I guess it was 2009 at that time, was teachers lined up at the copying machine, copying off literature, stapling it together and giving it to children and thinking that was going to inspire them to read. And that's just in our school. So if it's happening in that school, it's happening in hundreds of schools throughout this country. And so I thought, well, this is a solvable problem. It's on a macro level. I need to do whatever I can to make sure that they have all the chances they can have in the inside the walls of the school. Where it's where I originally thought I was going to be. But so we set out to build a children's book bank model that was ultra effective, efficient, scalable, and sustainable, and one we'd replicate in every major city in the country. That's all.
Sounds ambitious. And so you saw that the way that you could help was by providing the materials that a teacher might need to help, because that's what I was thinking is, obviously, if you've got the books, that's necessary. Do you also need the personnel to be able to teach the reading?
Great question. So here's the analogy that I think is a pretty simple one for anybody to understand. You've got hospitals and surgeon clinics. and you've got blood banks.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason why they're separate.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if the surgeon had to go find their own blood,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in our case, we're the lifeblood bank of learning.
Mm.
Our job is to get our hands on the resources, get it to where it needs to go, flood those book deserts so that we're at whatever program they're in, for-profit, nonprofit, preschool, after school, intervention, prevention, that the hospitals and surgeons and clinics, quote, don't have to be the same people finding the blood.
Mm.
That we saturate the market with that good quality, reading resources so they can do what they do best, and that's helping children become reading ready and then become reading proficient. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely makes sense.
Yes.
Great analogy. You've probably used it before.
Why don't you speak to that, Christy? Because you were on the receiving end of that.
Yeah, well, not necessarily as much the receiving end, but I was working with families as a home visitor. And so I was seeing both illiteracy as it affected the parents who were struggling to make ends meet and not being able to get to the next threshold in their jobs and their careers. And then, of course, their children who were not having many books at their fingertips, and mom and dad probably often didn't have enough time or energy left in their day to do the very thing that we know is so helpful for kids, which is just snuggling up and reading a book, fostering that sense of joy and excitement that a book can bring. So it was disheartening. And as a social worker for 20 some years, as I mentioned, I was always trying to find where I could have the greatest impact.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really excited when I learned about Bernie's Book Bank, and I saw the mission, and I saw they were laser focused on getting books in homes, and I could see exactly what would happen if there were books in homes, because that's what we were coaching our parents to do, just read with their children. So
let me ask you, George, you have kids, right?
I do.
How old are they again?
9, 5, will be 6 soon, and 1.
Do you have a few books in your home?
I have many books.
So how much do you think you spent on children's books in your lifetime? A lot or a little?
Probably quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Would you do it differently?
No.
No. And so all we're trying to do is replicate what our homes look like to our children from a book ownership perspective for these children.
And that's interesting. I was as you've been talking through the story and talking about blood banks, and I think about food banks, things that other places where you donate the the necessities of life. How much is because this is tied into education, and the education system is largely controlled by the government. Most cities, of course, there's private education, but how much of this is even though you're not for profit, a private problem that needs solving versus something where the government needs to step in and say, this school doesn't have enough books. We need to get this.
Geez, George, you're really setting me up for either something great here or to step into a really big hole. I don't know how to let's just put it this way. I'll bet on myself in Bernie's Book Bank.
There was a need.
Over most entities, including the government.
Okay, well said.
Wherever you stand on that, everyone, it's all cool with me. It's just, if the problem hasn't been solved yet, I'm not waiting for anybody else to solve it. And that's kind of how it went. As I looked around, I would see, there was models and there was people doing it. But if I were to apply the words of effective, efficient, scalable, and sustainable, all four of those, you might have something that's effective, but it's not sustainable or it's not efficient. And I thought, well, if it can be done in food banking, if it can be done in blood banking, and I'd almost call this a necessity too, right? Because it's not necessary to sustain life. But it is necessary to sustain a rich and full life.
Right.
And I think that's what we're trying to provide here in America to all citizens, at least last time I checked.
Yeah. Teach a man to fish.
That's exactly right.
That one, yeah.
Or teach a person or a woman.
Yes, well said. I have a bunch of questions for you.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about freedom promotions, but something that I've been just really, maybe this is the availability of it, but the digital transformation. So you deal with how many books now? 20 million? So
we push anywhere from, and just in Chicagoland, we push anywhere from 100 to 150,000 books a week.
Wow.
So since we started my garage 13 years ago, we employ 40 people now. We have 50,000 visitors to the facility every year, and we push about 150,000 books a week. So
Wow.
we're a logistics organization
Sure.
for anything.
Okay.
But you ask about the digital age. So 10, 11 years ago, my answer to that question was, well, I sure hope that we have our priorities straight in terms of how these children want to read. But it was just a hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to say today that the marketplace has really flushed this out for us, that if there's one shining spot in publishing, it's in children's books, because that children's book publishing is exploding.
Really?
And that really is an indicator that children still want books. Even children that can afford books, they prefer
The
books.
tangible book.
Yes.
Yeah.
And with digital too, you need a device, you need Wi-Fi. And because we do it at the Book Bank for dirt cheap, it's a good bet.
Yeah.
And I think it's the right thing that children want books and they need books, and it's more effective in terms of getting someone reading ready and then reading proficient.
Yeah.
It's the right way to go. So, and that doesn't mean there's not applications for digital in teaching someone anything. But I think when it comes to young children being reading ready and developing a love for reading, it's with books.
That makes a lot of sense.
We saw through the pandemic what happens if we lean on the digital,
Right.
Passage of information. I saw it because I had a caseload of 24 families who were all trying to teach, their older children at home with internet outages, with one Chromebook per, 3 kids, moving, all of that instability means that the digital prevalence is not as felt and seen as, an actual book that someone can hold. So,
and there's something accessible
going away.
and tangible about it. You had mentioned like the family getting together and snuggling up in bed. There's something different about being behind a screen. And we talk about that a lot on this podcast, the difference between in person and remote, which I know this isn't. There are some tools that help teach kids to read, as far as an iPad app or something, and the schools seem to be using more of them. But the accessibility factor, and even the transferability of it, right? You can like these books that they're mostly new or gently used, but I'm sure that the lifespan of that book doesn't end at that first child that receives it, right?
Hopefully not. And you bring up a good point. I get asked a lot, well, do you get the books back so you can distribute to someone else that needs them? Actually, no, because remember, this is a logistics challenge more than anything. And because those books now are where we need them to be, we now want to encourage that child to become the giver. And find, when they're done with them, you find a child in your home, your neighborhood, your building, whatever it may be. Now you pass them along, and you expect the same things out of them that we expect out of you. And so, it changes the dynamic that they're not always the one being given something, that they now are empowering somebody else. Right. And they're a part of the logistics, the supply chain. We don't want them coming back. We want them where they are. They just need to be passed on to the next person.
Even if it's passed down generationally, a lot of the books you asked about our house, we've got a lot of books that came from our childhood, or even our parents' childhood. So
that's right.
That is another plus on the.
That's right.
Sure is.
Where are the books coming from? Donations?
Well, so when you have a commitment like that of millions of books a year, and you're trying to grow that commitment in other areas of the country, you need to develop very robust pipelines, and that's anywhere from your home to being in relationship with some of the largest publishers and distributors in the world to make sure that whenever there's an opportunity, that we're there. And that might be a donation, it might be we buy books in the remainder markets. And now we're even printing books with publishers. So a publisher will come to us with a front list title and say, here's the metadata on this book. This is how much it is per unit if you were to add on to our print run. They love it because, one, I think that they're in business with us for the future, right? We're if we can grow the marketplace between now and the future, that's enormous for them. But also they love that because if they're running 5,000 units, we add on another 5,000 units, it drives down the cost per unit. So, and I think that's one of the, the keys to our success at the book bank is how we look at relationships. And that's, we want to be your partner, not your charity.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't come with our arms out. We come with them open.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you value? How can we be a part of your life professionally, personally, or both? And provide value back to you, which is critical in a quote unquote business where your productivity is not directly related to your revenue.
Gotcha.
The only thing you have is the relationship,
Right.
or nothing at all.
Right. What's the age span? Does it go like K
For
through
what?
12? Through the
For
book?
who we serve,
Mhm.
it's 0 to 12-year-olds.
0 to 12.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we really focus on
Yeah,
the
that makes
prevention
sense.
side
Yeah,
of things,
sure.
not the intervention side of things.
Okay. So talk about now the Freedom Promotions tie-in or lack thereof. Where does the new venture come into play? Because it's fairly new, right? Freedom Promotions? Yep.
Yeah, we're new, but we've partnered with another company that's been in business for a long time. So we have the capabilities pretty much to do anything at this point. I'll talk about it a little. I'll hand it over to Christy for her to talk about it a little bit as well. But with my experience in building the book bank and developing those relationships from a philanthropic perspective, especially in the corporate community, you learn that, especially today, they're trying any way they possibly can to check that corporate social responsibility box, the ESG box. They're under a lot more demands now from people that are coming to work for them and their customers.
Right.
62% of purchases made today are made with purpose in mind. I think that's only going to increase. And though our philanthropic future is more uncertain than it's ever been, we have this new phenomenon of consumerism becoming activism. Where is it made? How is it made? Who does it benefit?
Right.
And my thought was, it didn't take me long to learn that the philanthropic buckets at a corporation are just a little bit smaller than their marketing budgets.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's cool,
Yeah.
whatever. But I thought, well, what if we could turn a budget that they've already budgeted into impact? And promotional products is a $20 billion industry. Corporations still spend, whether it's client appreciation, colleague appreciation, whatever it may be, they're still spending a pretty penny on anything that's decorated with their logo. And my thought was, well, what if we created a mechanism for them to better leverage those marketing dollars, get what they need, but also be corporate and be socially responsible at the same time. So that's the working hypothesis. And so far, it's proven to be a good one.
Yeah.
So we're excited about it. And because really we believe we can provide the best customer service out there. We have access to any product that you might want. Our turnaround times are as good as anybody. Our pricing, we can match anybody. And at the end of the day, 100% of our profits goes back to literacy. So who wouldn't do that?
And that's important because there are companies where a portion goes back, right? But you're saying 100% of the profits.
No, it's the only reason we exist.
Trust
me, we have plenty of other things to do. We're not here to create generational wealth for ourselves and our family. We're here to deliver on a promise that our country has provided for hundreds of years that hasn't quite come true yet.
So cool.
Christy, what do you got to say about that? Anything?
No, I think you covered it.
Sorry, I just kind of covered all the bases.
Yeah, that's the whole reason to be.
Have you found, because it's a compelling message and it makes a lot of sense, when you talk to organizations, is it resonating? Like, what are some of the...
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
For
It's
sure.
a win-win. We provide a service they already needed, which, they were looking for in many of the occasions where I'm out developing business. They were already looking for a vendor for this thing. And I can add that we've got 30 years in the business behind us. And then on top of all of that, we have this beautiful give back that it strikes a chord with just about everybody with a heartbeat. So.
I mean, I will say, it's kind of like when the book bank started and we would start reaching out to schools that we thought might need help. I think they've been promised a lot before.
Yeah.
And they're like, so wait, you show up with 16,000 books a year for nothing and we don't have to do anything? And you're like, that's right. And I think the same thing, I'm feeling a little bit of the same thing now where people are like, why? Like, who in their right mind would give away 100% of their profit? Well, no one. But I'm not in my right mind. And Christy's not in her right mind because we are disturbed about the fact that we're living in a country that does not provide the same opportunities to every child that we should. So I think once people understand how sincere we are about this and that we deliver on our promise, and that you're almost going to be on the outside looking in if you're not working with us.
Yeah.
Because this is an opportunity for you to leverage a big marketing spend for the benefit of others. And there's really no reason why they should. In fact, so for every about $1 million of business that we do, it's about $200,000 back to literacy.
Wow. That's
so when you put things in those perspective and you think about what companies are spending and you put this company up against on top of this one, on top of that one, it can turn into a very large number. In fact, that's our goal. Our goal is to give away $100 million a year. And we don't say that like that's easy or that we're flippant about it. We say that out loud because we want it to happen and we believe it must happen and we know it will.
I like the confidence. Literacy, we've talked about, you've given some really compelling statistics and information. There's obviously a lot of need in the world and in this country.
Yeah.
When people are trying to decide where they're going to give, what do you tell them? I mean, if it's the reality that there's no other place to get promotional products that gives back to some form of a charity, I mean, 100% of profits is amazing, then that's a no-brainer. But like the book banks, or if they're going to donate somewhere, but they're looking at the Cancer Foundation or the Children's Hospital, or the Habitat for Humanity, how do you help them? Is it something just about passion? Is it education? How do they make that decision?
Well, one, I'd say, if you're a giver, thank you. If you're not a giver, start giving. It's good for you. It's good for your family. It's good for your children. And as they say, when you give, you receive. And that's a guarantee.
Yeah.
Where you give, that's, if you were to force me to make a pitch for literacy, I will. Because all these nonprofits, all these causes, everybody's just trying to help someone.
Yeah.
And I'm for anybody trying to help anybody, right? But if you want me to make a case for literacy, it's pretty easy. And that is, if you think about homelessness, poverty, hunger, all of our other social ill wills, if you really want to get right down to the source of it, it's lack of hope. And if you want to, and if you want to find where that comes from, you're going to find somewhere in that story, education and or literacy somewhere. And so I believe if you solve the literacy issue, you're going to solve a lot of other issues, and it's not just an emotional conversation, by the way, it's a practical one. There's a statistic that says if we were to move the literacy needle by 1%, it would have a $480 billion positive impact on the economy.
Wow.
So I ask, and this is more rhetorical than anything, but if that's the case, then why aren't we focusing on this? And I'll just leave that for you and the listeners to really think about that and contemplate, maybe ask your friends and family over dinner, because there's a reason. But I haven't seen a reason yet that's practical why we shouldn't be focusing on this.
And you talk about that. You talk about a 1% increase in the return on investment of that
Correct.
That giving.
Yeah.
You guys have given a lot over now 13 years or
well,
however long?
the book bank, the book bank from a book perspective, yes. And a lot of people have put their trust in us. But what I'm saying is, if you've got $1 in your hand, and you're trying to decide where you want to have the most impact, look, you're not going to compete with trying to save lives. And look, my brother died 2 years ago of ALS, and I would encourage anybody to give to research for ALS. And but if you're talking about all boats rising, all boats rising, there's no greater place than literacy. You just can't lose.
Yep. You talked about being a logistics company and the scaling up from your garage to serving cities throughout America, and at this point with Bernie's, right?
Getting there, yeah.
And you've got some ambitious goals of giving back $100 million through Freedom Promotions. And so does it stop in this country? Do you have your sights set on literacy in other parts of the world? Or do you think there's enough need? I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of need here, and that's where kind of your focus is.
Or you're just really confident in our ability to get things done. I like that.
Let's go global.
Listen, one, this is where I was born. This is the team I invest in. This is the team I play on, right? And these are my family members and my neighbors, right? And we've got a lot of issues right here in our own backyard. And I think that we need to get our house in order before we try to clean up anybody else's.
Yeah.
And because we want to be as effective as we can doing that, right? And I would love to solve every problem in America. And I'm winking, audience, if you can't see me. I'm doing that with a smile on my face. I'd love to solve every problem in America, but the fact of the matter is, in terms of 100 million with Freedom Promotions, will that happen in our lifetime? Chances are probably not. But my hope is that we've set up a foundation for a company that has the ability to do that in the future, and there's no reason why it shouldn't. And furthermore, just solve these problems. It's really not about money and numbers. For me, it's about solving the literacy crisis in America. Whatever we need to do to possibly do that.
So if someone wants to get involved and wants to help, they can go to Freedom Promotions and do that through their company swag or merchandising. They can get involved in a book event or drive. What would you tell people if they want to learn more about helping out?
Well, I would say if you're looking at serving in terms of if you have time, treasure, talent that you want to engage in, hopefully you have all three, and you want to provide all three, you just go to berniesbookbank.org. We do this for less than $2 a book. You'd be hard pressed to find a book at a garage sale for less than $2, let alone move it. If you're looking for a great place to volunteer, we take all ages and abilities at Bernie's Book Bank. And then we're always looking for people just to engage to help us develop relationships outside of our centers of influence. You could do book drives. That's an easy one. If you're someone who buys anything with your logo on it, it could be you're a boosters club. It could be you're the chief marketing officer of your company. You could be working on a local 5K race. Anything that your logo or image goes on. If you're one of those people and you want to have an impact at the same time, Freedom Promotions is your jam.
Cool.
And we want to work with you.
I like it.
Freedom spelled FREADOM.
Yeah.
Very clever.
Yeah.
And spread the word, because our mission's twofold. We want to amplify awareness as well. So just spread the word so more people are talking about it.
And you had just mentioned too the relationship part, resources and time, money or time, you can give that, but you guys have some great partners, it seems. And so by connecting you or, the mission to others is probably another significant way to
no doubt
spread the awareness and get more people involved, right?
No doubt.
Yeah.
Well, it's who you know what you know. Yeah. And I think developing authentic relationships around anything is critical to having a chance at succeeding at anything.
So many quotes.
And that means
coming
you
out
too.
of his mouth that we can just put in there.
We're going to teach you how to play golf. And how about you, Joe? Are you going to play golf with us?
Never swim a golf club.
Oh,
well, do you want to?
That's great. He's green.
Okay, well, we'll do that when it gets nice out. And you can teach me how to turn on the camera.
Awesome. Well, in addition to learning some golf, what's next for your family? What are you looking forward to in the year ahead?
We love our kids. We have 3 kids. One will be a senior in high school, so we're looking at colleges for him. One will be a freshman in high school, so that's a whole new set of adventures for her. And the youngest is going to be at the top of his elementary school, so he'll be the big man on
He'll
campus.
He'll be a senior in elementary
school. Yeah. So we're really excited about all of that, and we just got married last year and bought the house, so we've had a lot going on. So we're just kind of soaking in family life right now.
Maybe let the roots get a little bit longer.
Yeah,
because not only we just tend to put a lot on our plates.
Yeah, it sounds like that.
Yeah.
So
Bernie's is emerging, so we'll be going to new cities.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
You talk about, kids that are your kids' age.
Mhm.
Can they get involved with what you guys are doing?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I think I'm glad you brought that up, George, because I think that we need to be, as a country with our kids, explaining to them how they can have an impact on the world right now.
Mm.
And it's one of the things we're most proud of at the Book Bank, that we take all ages and abilities to volunteer there. We're the only organization in Chicagoland that would take a child under the age of 5.
Mm.
And if you think about things that we learn before we can remember, they become habit.
Mm.
And I think that service as a habit for our young folks is really good for them, in an age where mental health seems to be on all of our minds. I think part of that's just about perspective.
Mm-hmm.
If you serve on a regular basis, chances are your perspective is going to be a little bit different than somebody who doesn't.
Yeah.
And when you get proximate to people who have less than you, you tend, not always, but you tend to think about yourself a little bit less.
Mm.
And when you think about yourself a little bit more, or a little bit less, everything gets better.
Mm.
I think that kids can get involved as early as their parents will facilitate it.
Mm.
And I think it's good for everybody.
I love it. And they get involved at the main distribution center?
At the book bank, they can plug in there, but we also do pop-up processing centers. So our main facility is in Lake Bluff, we serve 6 counties of Chicagoland.
Okay.
But if you're someone that wanted to facilitate a pop-up, it could be at your park district, could be at your local high school, whatever, where we come in, we set up a processing center for 1 or 2, 3 days. That's interesting as well. And that's a really good option for people that are just being a little bit more ambitious and want to do something for their community. We can do that.
Oh, I love it.
So you're going to do that, George?
I think I might get them out in the west suburbs.
All right. Well, we'll follow up.
Yeah.
We've also had a handful of kids, or not a handful, many kids who get excited about Bernie's and the mission, and for their school project or Girl Scouts or whatever, they, instead of a lemonade stand, they collect books for a certain amount of time, and that gives them the feeling of giving back and tying it all together. So that's been fun to see.
I love it. We ask every guest on this show to recommend a resource that's been valuable in their career. And you guys have probably read lots of books or been associated with them. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something that an adult would read, but whether it is a book or a podcast or a group, what would you recommend to others that are, that's been something that's been valuable for you?
Oh, George, I might sound cliche, but the most valuable thing for me in my career and in this work is every single encounter I've had with a parent or child, because that's the lifeblood that keeps me going, and that's how I learn what's really out there, what's really needed, what's really working. That's the richest source of material, if you want to say that, but the richest source of growth and development I can think of. Now I'm hungry for podcasts and I love books, but I truly think that a moment in time with someone who's struggling, just it blows all the other things I could read away.
Sure. Thanks.
And I would just piggyback on that in terms of resources. You probably have people say, well, this is the podcast I listened to, or I've read this book. And it's my answer similar to Christy's, but in the fact that we walk by people every day, all day, that we sometimes don't even acknowledge. And we're looking for wisdom. And we look for it everywhere, except for the people that are in our own circles. And if they're not in your circles, get them in your circles. I've been blessed with the amount of people who, and I put time into the relationship too, but who believe in me and that spend time with me. And, just talk about folks over the age of 60 in our country, how we just kind of discard them. They have all the wisdom any of us will ever need. And it doesn't have to be a podcast. You don't have to read it. You don't have to discover it. You just go and spend some time with them. And maybe you even go with questions. you'll find your answers.
Yeah.
Right.
It's true.
So I think it's the people that you're amongst every day.
Yeah.
We're just always looking for something else
Right.
besides what's right in front of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of wisdom, you both have a lot of it. And you joked, Christy, have you guys ever considered writing a book?
No. You know what? The only, no.
You've got enough
No.
of them to distribute.
Well, but I'll say this. I'll never say never, but the only way I'd ever write a book is if it was for the right reasons and it had nothing to do with me.
Mm. Well, I even hesitate to ask this last question because we ask it to everybody, but because you've given so many pieces of what I would consider wisdom or advice. But if you were retiring, and I know you're not, you got a lot left to do, a lot of plans, a lot of ambition, but what would you say to somebody that was following in your footsteps? Or what would you say to somebody that's considering taking on an endeavor like you have, or looking to make a case within their own organization for good? What would you tell them?
I would say that's a good start.
Mm.
That your mind and your heart's around in there, right? It's all about, it has nothing to do with you.
Mm-hmm.
It has everything to do with everyone else. And, there's a great, if you haven't seen it before, you got to look this up. If you just YouTube starting a movement, there's this old video. It's about 7 minutes long. It looks, if you think you're watching the wrong video of a grainy guy, it's a grainy video of a guy looks like he's in Colorado dancing at this music festival all by himself. If that's what you've stumbled across, you're looking at the right video. But there's a voiceover talking about starting a movement, and it has nothing to do with the first knucklehead. It has to do with the first followers, and then the followers after that, and the followers after that. And, I would just say, it's gonna have nothing to do with you. It's gonna have to do with your ability to find the people who know how to do what you're trying to do, and provide them with a great opportunity to have an impact. If it's about you, you don't have a chance. If you think you're going to do it on your own, you don't have a chance. Like the whole self-made man, self-made person thing, I think is one of the biggest farces that we've ever perpetuated, because no one does anything on their own. Not to think about a celebrity, an athlete, anybody. No one did anything by themselves. Nothing. And so I would just say, surround yourself with people that love you, that believe in you, and that are way smarter than you. Yeah.
I would say that throughout all this time that I've worked in social work, I've seen a lot of duplication of services. So I would say to this person, yes, you're an outlier. If you're starting younger, you're an outlier. Feed off of that hunger to serve, and be sure to look around, because you don't want to recreate the wheel. We need to make change right now. So first, make sure you're not duplicating what other people are doing successfully. And second, stay focused on your mission. It's too easy when you are in the nonprofit world or in a humanitarian position to start to think about legal things that you can work for, or changes that are happening to your
problems.
the things that happen to your population that you're trying to serve. It's like you can get distracted so easily, and you really need to stay focused on that mission and just keep driving.
Well, I want to say thank you to you both. You've given us a lot to think about, a lot of ways we can act.
Thank you.
It's called Work Inspired, and you're inspiring people. Thank you for all you're doing, and I appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks for having us, George.
Thank you, George. We loved it.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to rate our show. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Work Inspired podcast so that you don't miss any of the incredible guests we have planned for upcoming episodes. We'll continue to find the best and brightest minds in business so that you can learn, grow, and succeed, and so that we can all work inspired. Work Inspired is brought to you by BOS, a leader in commercial working environments and a Hayworth best-in-class dealership. Experience our 360 approach and discover the team, tools, and techniques required to navigate the complexity of your next workspace at BOS.com. If you have ideas, feedback, or would like to be featured on our show, please email podcast@BOS.com. Thank you for listening. This has been a Workspace digital production. If you're interested in launching a podcast at your organization, please email info@workspace.digital for a free consultation.